So it started from a really nice, innocent place.
Right.
But with time, it just became more and more ugly and monstrous, so to speak. Right?
तुम कुछ भी ऐसा बोलो तो वो ट्रिगर हो जाते हैं, बट ऐसा क्यों है?
Because बहुत easy है ना.
Easy क्या है?
Making it part of who you are. Do you really think your parents had time to sit and question everything? See, this is a problem you don't understand. I will not shut up. We'll keep fighting and this will keep happening. And what can be a positive today can be a negative tomorrow.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of our podcast. Today I have Rahul with me. Today we are talking about religion and we're going to tear it apart in all different pieces. Today we're going to talk about the good, the bad and the ugly sides to it. So yeah, let's dive in. So I think one reason why I chose to do this episode is because I feel like faith and religion are something very personal to every person. But you know, in the country that we live in or in our family, people always make it a social thing, right? So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about what religion means, because it means different things to different people, and I think there should be more acceptance and appreciation for that fact. I think Rahul, will first talk about just our stances on religion, right? Like, are we religious, are we not religious, and why are we not religious or why are we religious, and so on. So maybe we can just start from there.
I was raised in a particularly religious household as such. Like my parents were very, very religious. More than religious, I would probably say God-fearing or community-fearing of what would happen in case they don't believe in God or don't follow societal norms. But I kind of realized very early on that this is not the thing for me. I couldn't very openly say I'm an atheist because people would be like, oh no, there's God, this, that and all of that hoopla, and that never worked for me. So I just chose a very easy path for me, which was, hey, I'm going to say I'm an agnostic. So I can say I believe in best of both worlds. If there's a God, let the God be there. He can do his thing, I'll do my thing, and we can go our own separate ways without interfering, right? Plus, if I say atheist, a lot of companies would not really give me holidays on religious occasions. This was like a very nice 50-50 where I would get the holidays also, but believe in whatever worked for me as well.
So you said something very interesting that you know, your parents were religious but वो God fearing भी थे at the same time, right? So what do you think is the difference between both of them?
I don't completely believe, again, I may be wrong here, but I don't really believe they're God-fearing, more so that they are community or society-fearing, because at least in our country, the society is really deeply knit by this fabric of religion. And mainly with God, they're really, really closely knit, and they're like, hey, everything that happens around, let's say, a temple or a festival that's really happening, right? And all of these are followed or come hand in hand with a lot of religions, customs, rituals, and all of that. And it's more of a community thing than an individual thing, right? For example, let's take Diwali. After the puja, people go to each other's houses. It's a thing that people do, and it kind of brings the society or the fabric of society together. Or, for example, when you go towards Maharashtra, Ganesh Chaturthi started in a very different way. It started as a way to say fuck you to the Britishers. And right now, when you see the whole fabric of how this festival is celebrated, the rituals that accompany it have all changed. So I think it's a lot to do with, hey, if I don't do this, what will the society think of me? And most people, in my opinion, are stuck in that chasm where they're like, okay, this is exactly where I am and I can't go against the society. And this is not going to fly for me. This is not going to work for me. And they start off from that place. No one really questions that, hey, why do I need to have faith in this, or what is going to work for me in this? So I think it kind of comes from that place.
I think for me, and we'll talk more about this, I think religion has both good parts and bad parts. So I want to take in the good parts that I really resonate with, sort of let go of the bad parts. But unfortunately, that looks like to everyone else around me that I am an atheist. But I think what religion is about at the very core of it, I think, is about having faith. And if you have faith, I don't think it's something you need to show it out loud and prove it to people that, you know, देखो मेरे पास बहुत faith है, right? I think it's something very internal, it's something very deep for me. But one of the biggest issues that I have is that, hey, if you believe in religion, here are all these useless rituals, baseless things that you have to follow that don't really make any sense. Like, for example, you know, if you are menstruating, don't visit a temple. If you are menstruating, don't enter the kitchen. Or, you know, don't eat non-veg on Tuesday, because somehow Tuesday is a more special day than all the other days. So I want to reject all of those baseless rituals जो कि surround करते हैं religion को, but I would like to consider that I still have faith in something. I am also on my own journey to figure out what it is really, but मेरे को ये चमकता नहीं है, you know, all these other things that surround, you know, like when you're doing when you're keeping prasad in front of the god, do you really, are you assuming that some imaginary creature will come and eat that prasad, and then that prasad or that laddu is so auspicious that you'll come and eat it again? Those things don't make any sense to me.
So, all of this started in a very interesting way, right? For example, again, I didn't know this and I was just doing a very surface level research. I could be wrong. One of the reasons why the whole menstruation thing started, at least from what I've understood, I don't know the temples, but women were not allowed to sleep on beds and all. And they're like, when at least now women use sanitary napkins, earlier they would not use anything, or they would use a piece of cloth, which meant that they would bleed onto whatever they were on the bed or the bedspreads, right? That would kind of make it harder to clean, and it kind of just played into the fact that okay, it's getting harder to do this, so just keep them away from all of this. And at that time when this thing started, it would have probably made sense because poverty, everyone has a lot to do and they didn't want to take on more chores. I'm not really supporting this by any standard. I'm just saying at that time it would have made sense, right? But with time, with how the society has evolved, all of these things does not make sense.
Yeah.
Another example is usually when you go to, let's say, a barber shop, most of these places are going to be closed on Tuesdays. It is not because there's a ritual to it, it's just because they wanted to give that one day off and take a break, right? It kind of just got woven into the fabric and people forgot why this happened. You would have heard from your grandparents that ke sunset ke baad nakhun nahi katte hain. A lot of people have this thing, and it kind of came from a place where it was ke yaar, after
Bijli nahi hoegi?
sunset, yeah, like when they started it was really dark, right? And let's say if you cut your nails, then it's going to be really sharp. You might probably eat it and that will cause problems to you later on, or you might step on it, that will again cause more problems. You'll get sick, and there's not enough access to medical care as such that we have right now. So it started from a really nice, innocent place.
Right.
But with time, it just became more and more ugly and monstrous, so to speak, right? These are all small, small practices, but when you kind of look at it from a bigger perspective as such, or when you look at it from the perspective of religion, how it intertwined itself and how people kind of made things even more and more worse, it just kept changing so much.
So you know, I watched this Vedas की एक comedy clip. वहाँ पे वो बोल रहा था कि religion should be like Apple support or Apple updates actually, because they update it every year, right, based on how the world is changing. And I think if the laws or if the rules, I think, would have been updated, it would have been more easy for most of our most of us to sort of follow through. So I really think that a lot of these rules जो कि उस time पे बने थे जब दुनिया बहुत ही अलग थी as compared to today. So that's one of the reasons why I have such a hard time in believing or following. And I'm not one of those people जिसको ऐसे बोल दिया तो बस कर लो, right? Like I need to understand the why behind things. और ये क्यों हो रहा है, क्यों करना है, ऐसे क्यों, वैसा क्यों. So unless and until you don't have a good reason for things, बहुत मुश्किल होगा. So tell me this, right? Like what made you question because you just said you come from a very religious family, right? तो तुमने बचपन से वही सब देखा होगा. मैं जिन लोगों को जानती हूँ जो कि बहुत religious family से आते हैं, वो inherently काफी religious हो जाते, right? So तुम्हारे केस में why was this different?
I think I don't really have a good answer here. I wish I knew what made me question my faith, but it kind of came from a place where I was like, I need proof. I think the proof of burden kind of falls on us. Like यार, if you want to understand कि ये हम क्यों कर रहे हैं, मतलब खुद पता लगा लो, हम नहीं बताएंगे. And again, all of this for me just goes back to the root where when they were telling people that you have to do this, they started from a really nice place, right? Again, basically when people started in the ancient days where your priest was telling you, or let's say your Maulana was telling you that every time before you read a namaz, you have to shower 5 times, or you have to clean your feet, hand, your body and everything, right? It came from a place of hygiene. But people were struggling to survive. They were trying really hard to make ends meet. They were trying to figure out where will the next meal come from. They're out in the field, or they're out trying to ply a trade or do something, right? And they didn't really have time to do this. And if you were to sit and explain, no, this is for your hygiene so you don't fall sick later down the line, no one would really understand that. So ideally what happened was they just said that, hey, if you don't do this, God will kind of smite you. And if history is of any evidence, fear works. Fear works wonders for people. Fear works magic in terms of, oh, I want this and I'm going to kind of scare you to doing this for me, right? Even when we were kids, our parents were like, oh, ये नहीं किया तो मार पड़ेगी, या फिर ये किया तो ये prize मिलेगा. So religion kind of became this weird tiered structure. या तो आपको prize मिलेगा या तो आप मार खाओगे. या तो आप जन्नत में जाओगे या आप नर्क में ऐसे आग में तलोएगा कोई आपको. So it just became that system eventually.
I think there was a phase in my life where nothing was really happening according to my wish, and my parents were like, बहुत पूजा करो, ये करो, वो करो, but
It's a
I
very
was doing
easy
all of
thing.
that, nothing was really working, and that kept happening for a while, and then I just quit my faith, and after that I don't know, like I just could never go back to that traditional construct जिसकी अभी हम बात कर रहे हैं. I just could never go back to that, and I think I've been trying to figure out what does my version of it really look like.
How did it feel to quit your faith? Because it's a very powerful statement, right? Usually you don't see people telling, I quit my faith. They say, I'm trying to figure it out, or I'm trying to figure out what this means for me. But did it feel like a burden to you initially? That's why you wanted to quit
I
it?
was like, I think I took the control or the power back in my hands in a way, where I was like, okay, I don't really know वहाँ पे कोई God है या नहीं, but it's okay. Like I don't, like if I'm communicating with God, I don't know if He's really listening to me or if I'm gonna get what I'm asking for. But ठीक है, at least I'm gonna give my best, and then I'll just see what happens. So I think मेरे साथ क्या हुआ, it was like a release of a lot of expectations. Where I was like, okay, मैंने भगवान को बोला है, भगवान मेरे को देगा 100%. Instead of that, hey, I've given my best, let's see what happens, right?
Did it feel more relieving that, hey, there's not like an entity controlling me versus I control whatever outcome I have?
Definitely. I think that's what I think I felt more in control of my life. कि जो भी होगा अच्छा बुरा, whatever is now dependent on me. I think that time I was fairly young. I was like maybe 16, 17, 18. उतना शायद दिमाग भी नहीं था मेरे में. But I think now I do believe, because I do believe there is a factor of called luck, called destiny. All of these things exist 110%. Now there has to be something or someone controlling these things. Now I don't know what the form of that person is, right? मतलब वो, whether it's a Shiv god, whether it's a
Brahma, Vishnu.
yeah, like Brahma god or the Ganesh god. I have no idea, right? Or it's like in a lot of religions, like I was reading about it थोड़े time पहले. There's a religion called Baha'i. वहाँ पे they don't even have human-like creatures that exist, but वहाँ पे वो बोलते कि God है, but God का form ऐसा है जो कि हमारे human brains समझ ही नहीं सकते basically. So it's like God has a form and a shape and a color and all of these things that our finite minds cannot even have the ability to understand.
So how Christians looked at pagans who would worship a forest or fire or water, something like
but
that.
But you can still see the forest, you can still see the fire. Here you cannot even imagine what it is, right? So it's more like that. I don't know, but I at this point,
but why
I
do you
feel
need a human form?
I don't know. No, because that's the form, not human form, but the forms that have been traditionally preached to us, right? Like this is how a Shiv god looks with that snake around his neck, or a Ganesh god looks with his nose that resembles the trunk of an elephant. I'm just saying, I'm there at the point in my life where I feel there is someone or some higher power that is definitely controlling a lot of odds. And like in a lot of places in spirituality, for example, they say that you yourself are that god, right? You are the greatest, you have the greatest supernatural power or whatever to bring your dreams in reality. Yeah, it's actually true. So these are the things like I'm thinking about, I'm exploring, but I'm not really sure where I am. So I want to go to the next question. ये डिस्कस करते हैं कि लोग religion को अपनी identity क्यों बनाते हैं. मुझे लगता है कि faith and religion is something, like I said, बहुत personal चीज़ होती है, और it's just a part of you, right? There's so many other parts of your life. So why do you think people make it such a big part of their lives? And more than that, तुम कुछ भी ऐसा बोलो तो वो trigger हो जाते हैं. But ऐसा क्यों है?
Because बहुत easy है ना.
Easy क्या है?
Making it part of who you are. जब मैं actually बैठ के ढूंढूंगा कि मैं कौन हूँ, मुझे पता नहीं है, मेहनत लगेगी उसमें. But when I already know कुछ बनाया है, it's easier to say that, hey, I'm a man who believes in ABC versus me just going कि मैं हिंदू हूँ, मैं मुसलमान हूँ, मैं सिख हूँ, मैं ईसाई हूँ. So much more easier. The moment I say this, people understand this. For example, you say in Karnataka or in Bangalore that मैं सिख हूँ versus go to Delhi and say मैं सिख हूँ. the definition is not going to change that much. Your everyday practice will change a little bit. That's again nuances that kind of come into play with time, place and all of that. But the identity bit becomes very very easy. It takes away the whole मुझे पहले पता लगाना है मैं कौन हूँ. What you're saying is when it's very personal and individual to someone, they've put in that effort to figure out what works for them and what doesn't work for them. Most people are just getting by life and they're not really asking these questions and they're like यार oh will this make sense for me, शायद ये मेरे लिए चलेगा, नो या मेरे लिए ये बिल्कुल नहीं चलेगा. मोस्ट पीपल आर लाइक ओ ये है चलो मैं ये पूरा करने वाला हूँ. एंड नो वंस रियली थॉट टू क्वेश्चन. नो डू यू रिमेंबर व्हेन यू वर अ किड यू वुड क्वेश्चन कि हम ये क्यों कर रहे हैं, हट करके चमाट आता था ना मुंह पे. क्यों? बिकॉज देयर पेरेंट्स वर टॉट द एग्जैक्ट सेम थिंग. योर पेरेंट्स व्हेन दे आस्क देयर पेरेंट्स कि हम ये क्यों करते हैं, वेरी रेयरली वुड दे लाइक हैव एन आंसर, और इफ दे हैड एन आंसर दे वुड एक्सप्लेन और दे वुड कुक अप सम स्टोरी. बट यूजुअली इट वाज जो बोला चुपचाप करो और सुनो. नो वन रियली sat down and explained why it happened. And the generation now is asking a lot more questions, and which makes a lot more sense, right? Because when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, your base is more or less sorted. Whatever your basic needs is, roti kapda makan, is sorted. Next you will attain a higher need, and that's when you will start questioning things. Right now, if you were to compare your generation, let's say, or the way you lead your life versus the way your parents led their life, do you really think your parents had time to sit and question everything, or were they way too busy making sure that hey, my kids will not sleep hungry, as a family we will not perish, we will survive? And there's so many such things when you look at previous generations, that it was always survival, survival, survival. Very few families have generational wealth and they've been enjoying on that, but honestly those people have different problems to deal with, and religion does not really happen to be one of those. When you look at it from a very different perspective, religion was something that was supposed to bind the society together. If it's a group of people who are constantly fighting each other, don't have a common cause, then what is exactly going to happen to them? They will keep fighting. But if I give a very simple thing, telling ये भगवान है, आप सब इस भगवान को मानते हो, आप सब इस भगवान को पूछते हो, then the amount of infighting that happens between these people reduces drastically. A lot of festivals started that way, where they wanted more people to come together and talk and celebrate and understand what is happening, share what people nowadays call tribal knowledge. But at that time it was not really that common. If I know something, I'll keep it to myself and I will make sure I survive. बाजू वाला मरे मुझे क्या. But now it's more around, okay, if I'm doing okay, I want to see मेरे आसपास जो है, I want to do good. So that has come down. So religion has to change. Change is happening, but it's very very slow. You really can't dictate who will look at faith, religion, identity in what lens, because at the end of the day it's very personal, and until something does not happen where they are forced to question their faith, it's not going to happen. Like you said, if you were 16, 17 when you questioned your faith, if that moment had not happened in your life would have been very different right now. You would have been a devout whatever religion your parents followed, or devout bhakt of a god whatever your parents used to pray to. If whatever happened in my life did not happen when it did, I would have not really questioned कि यार ये क्यों कर रहे हैं. My life would have been very different. Making it a part of your identity is very very easy. Questioning is the hard part, and most people can't.
मुझे लगता है also there's this fear that is imparted on you, right? कि तुम अगर follow नहीं करोगे, like you already mentioned, right? तो there's, God will punish you in ways you can't control, or there's a lot of fear of afterlife. I think that also plays a part of it. I think because most people are very fearful, they feel like if they don't make this a part of their identity, they feel like by doing that they're serving God, and God will be happy like that.
In your professional experience till date, just think very rationally. The number of times you have actually tried telling something to people, how many times has a reward worked versus how many times has fear actually worked?
No, for
The
sure.
moment you tell people that hey, if you don't perform, I'm going to fire you, or you won't have a job tomorrow, their incentive to work improves that much, right? Versus telling that hey, you kill it out of this park, like hit this ball like insane, मतलब दिखेगी नहीं मुझे ये, इतना अच्छा काम करो and I'll give you like an insane amount of money. People are like yeah sure whatever.
So I think my next question would be कि हम दोनों बहुत सारे लोगों को जानते हैं जो कि ऐसे households में पले बड़े हैं जहाँ पे religion is a very important thing that you have to follow, and most of the times उन पे वो सब force किया जाता है. So what do you think is the impact of someone's mental health when they go through that?
When things are forced and you don't question it, it really restricts the amount of growth that you can have as a human being, right? This does not just confine itself to religion, but it comes in all aspects of your life, right? Every time something's been forced down upon you and you don't question it and you just take it, ठीक है, sure, this is exactly how it is. Apart from very basic things, for example, let's say when you were a kid, your parents told you आँख को हाथ मत लगाओ, you would not listen to them. You always would be like, अगर कैंडल जल रहा है तो मैं एक बार उंगली डाल के देखूंगा क्या होगा. जब जलता है तब पता चलता है ना. So a lot of these people who have been forced and religion's been forced upon them, most people are doing pretty okay in life. They don't know what they're missing out. Most people don't know what life could have been otherwise. But when you look at it from a very different perspective, look at it from a perspective of a guy or a person instead who is, let's say, hey, a religion does not really work for me, I will figure out what works for me. So the ultimate nirvana state, where a person goes, hey, I will figure out which religion works for me or what parts of different religion work for me. These people will very strongly oppose the idea that if something is forced upon you, you should take it in the same stride. They will ask you to question everything. So a person who has not really seen the other side, who's always been very religious because of his family, he will have very strong values around it, right? For him, it is like questioning his or her own identity. And then it just becomes that, hey, you're attacking my identity, and then it becomes very nasty. So that's when it starts taking a toll on your mental health. But until then, as long as these individuals don't fight or clash with each other, till then it's very easy. Everyone's living in harmony. But the moment you start talking about this, let's say you talk about this to the elders in your house, they're like, hey, ऐसे बातें नहीं करते हैं, अच्छी बातें करते हैं. So for them, it's almost like you're attacking their
Yeah,
identity.
exactly.
Which is where the kind of problems arise that probably you would have seen. My problems have been kind of fairly easy because I've just been like, see, this is a problem, you don't understand, I will not shut up, we'll keep fighting and this will keep happening. And this is what happens in my house almost on a daily basis, right? Whenever they talk about religion, I'm like, did you question this? Why are we doing this? What does this mean? What is the significance of this? I am 28, 29, 30, whatever, and I keep questioning these things even now. Imagine if I was a kid and I questioned, maar khata na main. So now they just can't hit me, or possibly they can, they just don't.
आई थिंक मुझे लगता है जो लोग बहुत स्ट्रिक्ट हाउस होल्ड्स में पले बड़े हैं उनको आई थिंक दे वेरी रिजिड यू नो लाइक उनके साथ तुम ओपन डिस्कशंस नहीं कर सकते हो, तुम कुछ भी बोलोगे ऑफेंस ले लेते हैं. सो आई थिंक यू नो लाइक इट
But
विल बी
what
वेरी
does religion have to do with rigidity? That's just your parents being very strict.
हाँ, I'm talking about parents being strict about religion. So if the
No,
if the
so-
topic comes around religion,
People who get very defensive versus, let's say, people who grew up in like overly religious households. For example, I grew up in a fairly decently religious household. It was not overly religious, but my parents were religious. They're like, जब जब होगा हम तब manage करेंगे, right? But when you actually look at it from, let's say, my friends or my classmates from college who are like very typical upper class, से ब्राह्मण में भी वो ऊपर वाला जो दर्जा मिलता है वैसे ब्राह्मण्स, they were very religious but their parents were fairly open to having a conversation. So I don't think being rigid about religion has anything to do with people who are not open to talking about things. It's just people who are very defensive or very guarded are people who have grown up in a difficult household. Religion does not have to do anything with that.
basically my point is that if someone's parents are overly religious, that means they don't have the freedom to question, to explore their own things, to ask questions. And I think all of that would mean that, you know, they grow up thinking that this is the right way to live. And we'll see two extremes, right? One extreme would be, I don't want to subscribe to any of this, so I'm going to go completely opposite, which I guess happened in our case. Or the other extreme of that would be, you know, this is the right way to live life, this is what I'm going to subscribe to. कोई अगर आके मुझसे क्वेश्चन कर रहा है या कोई आके मुझे कुछ बोल रहा है करने को जो, you know, that let's say is a grey line or whatever, I'm not going to do it at all at any cost. It really depends, right? Like all of these things, and especially if you're the kind of person who really likes to ask questions, so that means you are made to shut off, and all of that can have a lot of impact on your mental health, right? Like I think anyone who I know who's grown up in a lot of very strict households, and add to that, you know, religion also becomes another layer on top. I think I don't think they're not very happy in life. They're like, you know, life is about sacrifice and punishment and penance and all of that. Like I don't think they're really enjoying life per se.
You know, on the contrary, when you actually talk to a lot of people, at least not fanatics but normal people, the whole fabric of religion was supposed to kind of be liberating. When it started, people were always very एंड सी दे वर लाइक यार मेरी वजह से हुआ, मेरी वजह से हुआ, मैंने ये किया ये नहीं हुआ, ये किया ये नहीं हुआ, वो किया ये नहीं हुआ, क्या मैंने ऐसे किया तो ये हुआ. एंड इट स्टार्ट causing a lot more chaos. This is again a theory that I have where people kind of went ke okay, I need this one superficial entity that I can say everything is in his hand, and then life is going to get much more easier. I will do whatever I have to do, but in the end the decision maker, I'm not the decision maker of what I get, what I don't get. It's just an outcome of things that happen, and that's the natural order of things. When, at least in my opinion, when religion started, it was just supposed to be this crutch that people had as a support. When things got really, really rough, and especially in a world where average, or I think your average age at which people were dying, I don't know what the exact phrase is, but the age at which people would die is probably like 40. People needed something to give them a lot more stability, something to rely on. So they said that, hey, there is a God. If the God wants me to kind of live longer, then I will recover from this. If the God doesn't want me to live longer, then probably it's my time. So that just started from that train of thought. Right? If I had to give, like, break this example even further down, it kind of became this thing like when you hurt your, let's say, ankle, and let's say a doctor is putting a cast on it, you have to be very, very sensitive कि यार मुझे ऐसे नहीं रखना है पैर, मुझे बहुत ऐसे नाजुक से नज़ाकत से पैर रखना है मेरा. Right? After a point, your cast is going to come out, but you will not really want to keep your foot down normally like you would do before you got hurt, because you're still scared कुछ हो जाएगा. And just in your head having that protection is a lot more easier than not having that protection. People kind of just got so used to having that crutch, they forgot that they still had to figure things out for themselves. Add to that how greedy humans are by nature, they just kept piling on things more and more and more to make it lucrative for themselves. If I control a lot of the procedures and processes on how things happen, then I make people dependent on me. If they are dependent on me, I get either of the 2-3 things that I need in life. I either need fame, I either need wealth, or I need power. Again, this is how society started constructing itself, right?
Who is
For
the I
example, here the person who wants to be in power could be, let's say, a landlord or could be a priest. He would purposefully make it more complex for you to do something and say, no, there is this ritual also, there is that ritual that you have to follow. And it got more and more complex than it had to be, because anytime something happened, earlier there were no doctors. People would either go to a Vaidji or a priest to pray, and then every time there was a problem, they would go, they're like, ye puja karo, fir iska ye solution aa jayega. So the more problems I create, the more solutions also I will create. So I'll either make more money, or I'm going to always stay influential, or I will have like a much bigger name and I'll have fame in terms of, okay yaar, इन्होंने ये पूजा करवाई थी, फिर इनके जीवन में सब ठीक हो गया. These two things may not be connected to each other at all. So the same way, the rigidity thing that we're talking about may not be completely related to religion, in my opinion. Again, we can have differing opinions here, but it's not completely related as such.
I think we can agree to disagree there. We've spoken more about the wrong sides of religion and we'll probably come back to it again. But I want to also touch upon what are the good parts of religion.
There's a lot of things. I don't really think anyone in their right mindset could be like, hey, I will answer all the positives of religion, because inherently it's a very loaded question, and what can be a positive today can be a negative tomorrow, right? Keeping that very heavy statement aside, let's say in terms of religion, I do agree with you. I think the most important thing that religion did was it created like a major sense of belonging for people, right? And especially when times got really, really hard and people had no idea what to rely on, it formed this beautiful community where people would come together, celebrate things together. Even today, there are a lot of communities that come together and have meals together, right? Again, I'm not completely sure where I read this, but there's some community in Italy where the kids go to work and but the old people, their parents, their grandparents don't really have anything to do because they're retired. So they all come together, they gather in like a common communal kitchen, they cook together, they eat together. This change mainly happened after COVID. Now, after COVID, they started seeing the overall happiness in that community increased a lot. Now, this is just one example I'm picking from, but overall, religion, I think, made people happy because they kind of found the people they could rely on a little bit. Apart from that, they also got a little bit of emotional comfort from the people, because when you live together and you pray together, the type of challenges that you face are kind of similar to some extent. Again, individually family based challenges would always be different because we are humans, we are different and all of that, but they found some sort of emotional comfort given the type of challenges that they were facing, right? And then I think it also propagated a lot of non-violence in peace also to certain extent, right? For example, the bloodiest war that King Ashoka had, he almost became a pacifist, and that's when he started spreading Buddhism. He sent messengers far and wide to be like, okay, this is what I'm going to preach right now. And in certain ways, that also did change the way the things were going to happen going forward. Had he not done that, probably would have been a much more violent world. Or maybe, let's say, there would be much less Buddhists, a lot more Christians. We don't know. But I think it helped spreading the ideology and message a lot further off than it was possible. So I think one last point that I'd like to add is I think religion is what kind of supported a lot of art philosophy initially, especially when you look at the period around Renaissance, or when you look at the period around, let's say, a lot of the kings that we had, right? Their patrons were kind of inspired by religion. A lot of the old folk songs that we listen to, a lot of the Sufis, Qawwalis and all we listen to were directly, indirectly either praising a god, were praising their guru or something like that, right? Art and philosophy inherently kind of originated from religion, right? The way it kind of went on its own path is a whole different story. But had we not had religion, had we not had a common thread to hold people together, art would have never flourished. It would have always been very disparate or broken down into a lot of different things. Maybe you would understand, maybe you would not understand. And until unless it was nature which everyone saw, it would never have flourished.
Yeah, so basically to conclude, religion helps with a lot of law and order in the society, definitely gives some people a lot of peace of mind. It helps with community and belonging. You believe in something that is greater than yourself, so that obviously means that it makes you more humble. It promotes good deeds. A lot of religion, they encourage you to donate or take care of the underprivileged. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of good parts to religion. But coming now to the ugly sides of it, right? Maybe I will tell some of my points first, and then you can add on top of that.
Sure.
I think in the day to day, one of the things that I find, that is not right with people who are religious is that they think as long as they're religious and they follow all the right rituals, but apart from that, if they do, their thoughts are not good. They're still doing things that are not kind to people, or they are, they're not doing good by people. I think they will get away with it, right? But I feel it's more important to
Get away how?
like they feel it's more important to follow the rituals, pray and do aarti and all of that, rather than being a good person. And I've seen a lot of examples like that, especially growing up, right? People in my extended family and all of that. Like, I don't think they're necessarily nice people, kind people, but they would consider themselves to be overly religious, and somehow they're able to justify in their head that just because they're showing up and going to a temple every day and everything else that they're doing which is not for the greater good of their family, they're able to somehow, they'll get away with that, right? That's what I meant. And obviously, on the other hand, like in the larger scheme of things, there is like a lot of extremist behavior. Like, of course, there's more than enough to be said about this to validate this. But, like somehow when people make religion their identity and they go to extreme lengths, so then they're like religion at all costs, right? And that would also mean doing things that in the first place religion did not allow, which is, let's say, killing other people or doing harm towards other people, right? So yeah, like what do you think?
I agree. I think it started off very beautifully, right? It was very innocent. It wanted to bring people together. That's how religion started. But naturally, what happened is people kind of lost their individual identity, and the religion became who they were, and they got so crazy about it that it started seeding roots of conflict and division amongst them. When you look at the way, let's say, Romans propagated Christianity, or a lot of the Muslim or Islam sultans kind of started conquering lands and converting people, or even now how conversions happen where people are told that, hey, if you convert, we'll give you food to eat when they have absolutely nothing to eat. All of these things are very underhanded tactics of how to kind of get more people under our fold, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it has led to a lot of conflict, it has led to a lot of violence, right? So that's a major issue, I think, with religion, and I don't completely, this is one of the problems why I can't adhere to it, where I have kind of found issues, where I found inconsistencies that, okay, if you're saying this, then why did this happen? If you're actually preaching, let's say, love thy neighbor, then why are you actually going and killing a neighbor who's not from the same faith? Why is that really happening? So religion breeds a lot of superstitions, right? You do this, this will happen. You don't do this, this will happen. You do this, God will actually reward you. You do this, God will smite you. That does not really happen that way. It's not black and white. Also, if it was so black and white, then how is God receiving all of these messages from you? And if He is, how is He getting to act on it? Religion has bred a lot of rigidity that आपको ये बोला है, ऐसे बोला है, ऐसे ही करना है. Anything beyond the scope of this is not allowed, right? And this is honestly a problem of humankind and not the people who propagated or started religion. All religions will tell you that, hey, do good. And by choice, or I don't know if it just happened by accident, but a lot of religious books are a little ambiguous in nature, right? Where they force you to think, they force you to adapt whatever is written in the scriptures to your actual situation and do the best possible thing. But people take it literally, or they absolutely subvert it, or they take it the way they want to, which is not in the best of interest, right? Where it will lead to harm, right? For example, one of the extremism thing that you spoke about, where people kind of almost become way too religious, where they're almost a fanatic and then they start harming or hurting people. This is a major problem. Otherwise, there's a very cute thing that had happened, and I call it cute now, is for the longest that everyone thought Earth is flat and everything revolves around the sun. And the church tried really, really hard to kind of prove otherwise. They locked Galileo behind bars and they said that, hey, you can't really question what the church is telling you, what is right and what is not. The church will decide, right? But Galileo said, no, I will prove the fact that, okay, there are these constellations and there are planetary bodies and all of that, and all of that revolves around the sun. Imagine if this hindrance was not there. Imagine if there was no roadblock, no one making it difficult for you to be like, you have a question, go ahead and figure it out. You find an answer, sure. You don't, that's okay, it's worth a try. Imagine if the world was like that. Do you not think we would have made a lot more advancements today than we have comparatively? I think the last thing would probably be how people have been exploited on the name of religion till date. A lot of times, for lack of a better word, a lot of cults are started under the guise of religion, and then you're told you do this and this will happen, you don't do this, this will happen.
Right.
And most people are in such a troubled state, even the slightest thing that goes their way, they take it into a very major sign that, hey, I started doing this under this religion, which kind of made things better for me. But when you look at things for the way they are, it's just a cult where you're being mind washed into believing whatever they want to believe for their own personal gains. You just become a peg in their wheel and you're like, यार मुझे ये चाहिए, आप बस मेरे लिए जरिया बन रहे हो.
I don't think we should ignore the fact about how religion is being used today to sort of, gain political majority and political control, right? So, yeah, I think, which also brings me to my next question, which I think is a little dark. How do you think godmen or religious institutions get away with a lot of wrongdoing, abuses, or scandals? And somehow, I don't know, for some reason, people can just ignore that and still continue to follow what they are preaching. And I'm not questioning what they're preaching, but a lot of the things that go around in the background.
I don't really have a very well refined, polished answer for you, but at the end of the day, in my opinion, all religions are cult. Whether you like it or not, every single thing is a cult. And I don't mean this in a bad way. For example, if I like, let's say, the color green too much, and I convince people that, hey, green is the best color, and everyone starts following what I tell, it is a cult. Let's just take it at face value and say it is what it is, right? The problem starts when the people who started these institutions, organizations, religions, or just started influencing these people, right? And what happens is they've gained too much control in the society. They've gained too much influence and power in the society. Now they believe they're infallible. No one can touch them. Like, I can do whatever I want to. I have absolute control and power. And this comes because of the way the society is structured. For example, let's say if I'm a godman, I have a decent sized following. It means I have access to people who are in power. It means I have access to people who will do anything I want them to do. It means I have access to money to get whatever I want at the end of the day. When I have fame, power, and money at the end of the day, I can control any two of these pillars.
Yeah.
Changing the narrative becomes so much more easier. And anyone who even remotely dares to go against me, I can silence them. And that's how I'm going to get away with it.
So I guess ultimately it's just a point about power, and I think when someone is drunk in power, they start feeling like they are invincible. You can't defeat them, you can't get back at them, and I think the lines between good and the bad really start blurring. वो काफ़ी ग्रे हो जाती हैं, राइट? सो
It's always grey to begin with.
Yeah.
It's just once you start going beyond the grey and you're like, whatever I say will happen. If you've seen Sacred Games, the guy keeps going, Aham Brahmasmi. And the moment you start believing you are God, you control everything else, that's when you will trip and abuse your power.
cool. I have two final questions for you. I think one is a very fun question. For people like us and for people who are, I would say more so in our generation, who really like to question things, I think we approach things more from a rational point of view or from a scientific point of view, right? So what do you think? Can science and faith, can they coexist together, and how can they coexist together?
They do coexist together even today, right? There are plenty of examples. Again, I think I'm just drawing from examples over and over again because I see this happening on a daily basis. The chief, I don't know what the person is called, but the main director of ISRO, before a rocket launch, he goes to a temple to just pray. He's a scientist. He's making a rocket that's going to actually cross Earth's gravitational forces, have like so many things happen at the same time, and then go in space and probably deploy like a satellite or something, or go find traces of something on a different planet or explore a planet, right? We don't know what they're doing, but the guy who is absolutely a man of science, when someone like him can kind of have faith in something much more bigger and higher than himself, I think yes, faith and science or religion and science can coexist, but it will not coexist in a place where you don't have the liberty to question things. You should always have liberty to question things, and then you're free to believe in whatever you are believing in. My personal philosophy is, hey, you believe in this, really happy for you, just don't shove it down my throat. As long as you don't force your ideals, your ideologies, your religion, your faith upon me, we can all coexist happily like science and religion can.
Cool. I think one final question would be, what advice would you give to someone who is right now sort of questioning their religion and they're confused and they're like, ये rules मेरे लिए make sense नहीं कर रहे, but I also don't want to completely give up on the idea that, like we spoke, that there is like a higher power out there. क्या advice दोगे तुम उनको?
I don't really have an advice. I'm like, read, there's plenty of material out there, read and figure it out. The way I figured things out for myself was just reading scriptures, and I came from a place where I was very petty because I was in an argument. Someone quoted Bhagavad Gita to me, and I was like, I'm going to quote from Quran and Bible and kind of win this argument. So I came from that place. While I was reading a lot of different holy books, I realized inherently the basis for everything is same. All religions want you to be nice. All religions want you to help other people. It's just the nuances kind of get tricky, but as long as something works for you, you can figure out, okay, this religion, this works for me, that religion, that works for me, this religion, absolutely this does not work for me. And all religions by default are really, really grey. You just have to figure out whether whatever you're doing is the right thing or no.
I think what I would say is that like faith is a very deeply personal journey. So while you're on the path to figure that out, I think really get to know yourself, understand, what ticks you, what does not tick you, what works for you, and be a nice person, like, be a kind person, do kind deed for strangers, for other people, make sure you think positively, have gratitude about everything that you have today. So I think while you're figuring that part of the journey out, try to be a better person every single day, right? Like when you get up, try to make the most of your day. Think of the fact that you've gotten this day, that is a big gift in itself, and every single day you can sort of rewrite that chapter of your life. While you are on that journey, really focus on these side of the things, and I think that like when you try to be a better person, I think you will try to figure out your own answers and it'll lead you somewhere, right? And what is that somewhere is something that will depend on your life, your experiences, how you grew up, where you grew up, and so on. So yeah, like, and while you practice that, you can preach that, but don't force it onto other people's throats, just like Rahul said. Yeah, with that we conclude the episode of today's podcast. We hope that you like this, you enjoyed this. Please don't take any offense. These are just our personal experiences and what we think about religion. But if you do think, this will spark some interesting discussions in your friends or family or different circles, circle it around, like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you for the next episode. Bye bye.